Lastly, we had an NBA player who really opened up for the very first time. And I'm going to read you excerpts from his Players Tribune piece. His name is Kevin Love, and he has dealt with a lot. Everyone is going through something is the title of his piece via the Players Tribune. Now, what I want this to also be real quick is he is being honest. He's being humble. He's opening himself up, mainly for the cause because he was inspired by DeMar DeRozan and what DeMar DeRozan has had to deal with throughout, it seems, the entirety of his NBA career, if not the last few years. And mainly bring light to a cause and how difficult it is to open up, but really how refreshing it is as well. So here are some of the excerpts via the Players Tribune. Kevin Love, on November 5th, right after a game against the Hawks, I had a panic attack. It came out of nowhere. I never had one before. I didn't even know if they were real, but it was real as a broken hand. Since that day, almost everything about the way I think about my mental health has changed. Then came the panic attack that happened during a game. November 5th, 2 months and 3 days after I turned 29. Perfect storm of things was about to collide. I was stressed about issues. I'd been dealing with my family, wasn't sleeping, expectations on the court. I knew something was wrong right after tip-off, and then he goes into what exactly went wrong. After halftime, it all hit the fan. Coach Lou called a timeout. I felt my heart racing. I was having trouble breathing. It was hard to describe. Everything was spinning. I nodded, but I didn't hear much of what Coach Lou said. By that point, I was freaking out. When I got up to walk out of the huddle, I knew I couldn't re-enter the game. Like literally couldn't do it physically. I blurted something like, I'll be right back. Went to the locker room. Really, I was just hoping my heart would stop racing. It was like my body was trying to say to me, you're about to die. I ended up on the floor in the training room, lying on my back, trying to get enough air to breathe. The next part was a blur. Someone from the Cavs accompanied me to a Cleveland clinic. They ran a bunch of tests. Everything seemed to check out, which was a relief. But I remember leaving the hospital thinking, wait, then what the hell just happened? So he's confused. Call it a stigma, call it a fear. You can call it a number of things. But what I was worried about wasn't just my own inner struggles, but how difficult it was to talk about them. I didn't want people to perceive me as somehow, less reliable as a teammate. And it all went back to the playbook I'd learned growing up. So I did one little thing. The Cavs helped me find a therapist. I set up an appointment. I'm the last person who would have thought I'd be seeing a therapist. I remember when I was 2 or 3 years into the league, a friend asked me why NBA players didn't see therapists. I scoffed at the idea. No way any of us is going to talk to someone. I was 20 or 21. I'd grown up around basketball. On basketball teams, nobody talked about what they were struggling with. I remember thinking, what are my problems? I'm healthy. I play basketball. What do I have to worry about? I never heard of any pro athlete talking about mental health. And I didn't want to be the only one. I didn't want to look weak. Honestly, I just didn't think I needed it. Now, before we continue, this is how athletes have trained their bodies and their minds. What have baseball players been taught if they're hurting? Rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. In the NBA, oh, come on, you're going to be fine. Tough it out. As Eminem said, stiffen that upper lip. And that's what they're taught. Yet Kevin continues. One of the biggest breakthroughs happened one day in December with his therapist when we got talking about my grandma Carol. She was the pillar of our family. Growing up, she lived with us, and in a lot of ways, she was like another parent to me. When I made the NBA, she was getting older. I didn't see her as often as I used to. And then it continues on. During my 6th year, telling a stranger about my grandma made me see how much pain it still caused me. Digging into it, I realized that what hurt most was not being able to say a proper goodbye. I never had a chance to really grieve, and I felt terrible that I hadn't been in better touch with her in her last years. Moving forward, I wanted to share that story because of how eye-opening it was to talk about it. In the short time I've been meeting with the therapist, I've seen the power of saying things out loud in a setting like that. I know you just don't get rid of problems by talking about them, but I've learned that over time, maybe you can better understand them and make them more manageable. Look, I'm not saying everyone go see a therapist. The biggest lesson for me wasn't about a therapist. It was about confronting the fact that I needed help. If you're reading this and you're having a hard time, no matter how big or small it seems to you, I want to remind you that you're not weird or different for sharing what you're going through. And then moving forward, he also went on to say this: everyone is going through something that we can't see, which is so true. And then I believe there's one more on top of that, correct? No, okay. So the main point that we need to strike home, we could put that last one up as well, one more time. It's not only indicative of the field of NBA players who have trained their minds, their bodies, and also their hearts to not really express themselves. Yeah, they'll do it maybe sometimes to family. Maybe they'll do it to a friend. But what he has shown is the inner workings of an NBA locker room and how you don't tell anybody really about anything. You could bond in different areas of your life, but you don't get into the personal. I've dealt with demons in the past. I know a lot of other people have as well. We've all been doubted at one time or another. But there is something refreshing, excuse me, about opening up, not necessarily to unknown people. Obviously, you should trust them. But just getting it out. You know, if someone breaks up with you, what do? You cry it out. If you have a problem with somebody, you open up. If you have a problem going on with your life, you talk to your mom, you talk to your dad, you talk to your significant other, you talk to your best friend. The worst thing that you could possibly do is keep it all in, as Kevin Love has shown. So I commend him for doing this because it is a remarkable story. And really, it goes to show how the one thing that wasn't mentioned was how much he was blamed in the past few years. I'm glad that he's finally getting it out. Let us know your thoughts. YouTube.com/TYT Sports. See you next time.